You were taught to be kind, fair, and selfless, and told the world would reward you for it. But has it? Or has it quietly punished you? You hold your tongue, avoid conflict, give more than you get, and yet you're overlooked, disrespected, and drained. The truth is hard. Being a good person in the wrong way doesn't make you noble. It makes you invisible. This video is your wake-up call. With lessons from Machiavelli's The Prince and the unshaking clarity of Stoic philosophy, we'll expose the toxic illusion that kindness equals strength. We'll show you how blind virtue becomes a trap and how to break free without losing your soul, because the world doesn't reward good intentions. It rewards clarity, boundaries, and strength. If you're done being manipulated for your goodness, subscribe now. This is where your freedom begins, not by being loved, but by being respected. Number 1, the brutal truth: why being a good person fails. You were raised on a promise that never came true, that if you were kind, selfless, and fair, if you always did the right thing, the world would eventually reward you. People would recognize your intentions. Life would go easier. But now you're waking up to a quieter, more brutal truth. You've done everything right, and still, you're overlooked, disrespected, dismissed. Why? Because the world doesn't respond to your goodness. It responds to your power, your boundaries, your presence. And without those, your virtue becomes invisible. This might sound harsh, but it's not pessimism. It's clarity. Niccolo Machiavelli saw it centuries ago when he wrote The Prince. He warned that a man who wishes to act entirely up to his professions of virtue soon meets with what destroys him among so much that is evil. It's not that goodness is wrong. It's that goodness without structure, without cunning or strength, is a dangerous illusion. It makes you soft clay in the hands of people who are not playing the same moral game. While you try to be noble, they try to win. Even the Stoics, often misunderstood as moral idealists, weren't naive. Marcus Aurelius didn't preach being agreeable. He preached being immovable. He ruled an empire, made hard decisions, and yet held firm to justice. Not out of weakness, but from principle, fortified by courage. His idea of a good man was not someone who gets along with everyone. It was someone who stands straight without being kept straight. And that strength, not sentimentality, was the root of his virtue. Yet most people confuse kindness with submission. You nod along even when you disagree. You overextend yourself out of fear someone might think you're selfish. You bite your tongue to avoid being labeled difficult. And deep down, you think your patience and politeness will eventually be noticed, but they won't. Because the truth is, people don't value what you constantly give away for free. And in today's world, blind kindness is often seen not as strength, but as a sign that you can be manipulated. Think about it. When someone constantly says yes, avoids conflict, and never sets limits, do you admire them? Or do you start to overlook them? That's what's happening to you. Your invisible labor, your unspoken sacrifices, your chronic flexibility. It doesn't earn you respect. It makes people comfortable using you. Because kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's self-erasure. Look at the people who are truly respected. Not just liked, but respected. They're not always the warmest or most agreeable, but they're grounded. They know who they are. They're not afraid to say no. They're not afraid to walk away. Their goodness is not a performance. It's rooted in sovereignty, in a calm refusal to be controlled. And that, more than any loud display of virtue, is what commands lasting respect. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because standing in your own truth often means rejecting the social game of niceness. You stop needing to please everyone. You stop managing others' emotions at the expense of your own. And yes, some people will be offended by that, but their discomfort is not your burden. It's proof that they benefited from your self-denial. You see, this isn't a call to become cold or harsh. It's a call to become real, to stop acting from guilt and start acting from grounded awareness. Machiavelli understood something most people still don't. The world runs on perceptions, not intentions. You may intend to be good, to be fair, but if people perceive you as weak, your goodness will be used against you. It will become a script others write for you until you rip it up. This shift from being good for approval to being good with boundaries is where your power begins. In Machiavelli's view, a ruler who tried only to be loved would lose both love and power, but one who balanced strength with perception could govern effectively. The same is true in your life. You're not here to be everyone's emotional caretaker. You're here to live aligned with your values while protecting your peace. And let's be honest, most of your pain hasn't come from being too harsh. It came from being too soft where you needed to be firm, from giving too many chances, from keeping the peace while you fell apart inside, from believing that being liked was the same as being respected. But it's not. Being liked is fragile. It shifts with moods, gossip, misunderstandings. Being respected is deeper. It's earned through presence, discipline, and clarity. And this isn't your fault. It's what society trained you to do. It taught you to be loyal, but not to yourself, to be generous, but not discerning, to be good, but never sovereign. That training has to end, because what the Stoics taught, what Machiavelli knew, is this. Your peace comes not from being seen as good, but from being undisturbed by how others see you. So where do you begin? You begin by letting go of the false idea that goodness alone will protect you. You begin by anchoring your kindness in structure. You begin by learning to say no without guilt, by making decisions from clarity, not fear. Because real goodness doesn't beg to be liked. It doesn't compromise itself to stay comfortable. It radiates from inner alignment, from discipline, from calm strength. This is not a rejection of your values. It's their protection. And if you don't do it, no one else will. So here's the brutal truth. The world will not reward you for being a good person, but it will respect you if you are a clear, grounded, discerning one who knows when to give and when to guard, and that's a kind of power no one can take from you. Number 2, the psychological prison, the fear behind your kindness. Why is it so hard to stop being the nice guy? Why do you keep saying yes when everything in your body wants to say no? Why does putting yourself first feel wrong, even when you're drowning? The answer isn't about morality, it's about fear. Deep, conditioned fear. The kind you picked up long before you had words for it. You learned that being good, agreeable, polite, likable, wasn't just admirable, it was necessary. Necessary to avoid punishment, necessary to feel safe, necessary to be loved. The Stoics would call this an invisible chain, not a shackle of iron, but of habit and perception. A mental prison built from repetition, from survival instincts carried over from childhood. Somewhere in your story, you connected worth with service. So you made yourself useful, pleasant, and dependable. You became the one who listens, who agrees, who makes others comfortable, even if it meant erasing parts of yourself to do it. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." But what if the adversity is not external? What if the battle you've been avoiding is not with people, but with the voice in your head that tells you love must be earned through sacrifice? That being true to yourself is dangerous? That saying no will make you unlovable? And here's the truth no one told you. Your need to be kind is often not a reflection of character. It's a survival tactic. Behind the people-pleasing mask is fear, raw, anxious, and relentless. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being needed. So instead of drawing boundaries, you bend, you explain, you appease, you try to control how others see you, all in the name of being good. But Stoicism doesn't reward emotional obedience. It rewards clarity. Epictetus said, "If you want to be free, don't wish for things to happen as you want, but wish for them to happen as they do, and you will be at peace." He's not telling you to be passive. He's saying accept reality, including the reality that not everyone will like you. And that's not a failure. That's freedom. This is where most people struggle. The moment they stop conforming, others get uncomfortable. You start hearing things like, "You've changed," or "You're being selfish." But the truth is, they're not reacting to your strength. They're reacting to the loss of your submission. You're no longer playing the role that kept their comfort intact. And to walk this path, you must be willing to disappoint the people who benefited from your silence. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly, "The approval of others? To be controlled by it means you're their slave." And most people are enslaved. Politely, silently, invisibly. They live lives based on how they're perceived, not on what they actually value. They call it kindness, but often it's just fear dressed in virtue's clothing. Take Robin Williams, one of the most beloved entertainers of our time. Warm, generous, endlessly giving. But behind his brilliance was someone who felt responsible for everyone's happiness but his own. He once said, "I think the saddest people always try their hardest to make others happy because they know what it feels like to feel absolutely worthless." His life is a haunting reminder that kindness without boundaries can become a mask for despair. So what's the answer? Not to become cold or indifferent, but to separate kindness from compliance. Kindness rooted in choice is strength. Kindness rooted in fear is bondage. The difference is where it comes from. One comes from groundedness. The other comes from desperation. One builds connection. The other creates resentment. And that's where most burnout, not from doing too much, but from giving too much without ever receiving. You spend your days tending to others while quietly hoping someone will tend to you. And when they don't, you tell yourself it's because you haven't been kind enough yet, that you just need to be more available, more selfless, more agreeable. It's a loop, and it never ends until you decide to step off. The Stoics taught that virtue is built on wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, not approval. And sometimes being just means saying no. Sometimes courage looks like disappointing people who expect you to always say yes. Sometimes wisdom means walking away, not because you're angry, but because peace requires it. This isn't about being unkind, it's about being whole. You're not a mirror for others to project onto. You're not a sponge for their emotional chaos. You are a human being with your own truth, your own fire, your own boundaries. And when you reclaim that, not with aggression, but with calm certainty, you don't become cruel, you become real. You will feel guilt at first, that's expected, because the guilt you feel isn't proof you're doing something wrong. It's proof you're breaking the cycle. It's the nervous system catching up to a new truth, that you are allowed to exist without being useful, that your value is not a transaction. Eventually, you'll come to see this. You don't have to choose between being kind and being strong. You can be both, but only if your kindness has a spine behind it, only if it's rooted in integrity, not fear. The people who matter, the ones who truly see you, they won't need your submission, they'll want your truth. And those who demand you stay small? Let them go. Their approval was never love, it was control. And once you release yourself from the need to be understood by everyone, you begin to understand yourself with unshakable clarity. That's when your goodness stops being a performance and starts becoming power. Number 3, the Machiavellian Manual, Lessons from the Prince. There's a reason most people who call themselves good often feel powerless. They live by ideals while the world moves by strategy. They think if they're honest, kind, and fair, the world will meet them there. But the Stoics, like the realists they were, never believed in such illusions, and neither did Niccolò Machiavelli. If Stoicism is about inner alignment, Machiavellian thought is about outer navigation, seeing the world not as we wish it to be, but as it is. And that's where your power begins, when you stop expecting fairness from a world that isn't built for it. Machiavelli never said to be evil. That's a modern misreading. What he said was this: if you try to be good in every situation, you'll be crushed by those who aren't. In The Prince, he writes, a man who wishes to act entirely up to his professions of virtue soon meets with what destroys him. In other words, morality without strategy is suicide. You don't need to become cruel, but you do need to stop being predictable. Likewise, the Stoics taught that you should accept what's beyond your control and refine what is within it. And one of the greatest things within your control is your image. People do not respond to your inner goodness. They respond to how you present, how you carry yourself, how you frame your presence. This is not vanity, this is self-governance. It's the conscious choice to stop being easy to read, easy to use, easy to manipulate. In The Prince, Machiavelli gives us the metaphor of the lion and the fox. A ruler must be both lion and fox. The lion is strength, the fox is cunning. Strength alone will not protect you, because brute force without subtlety leads to traps. And cunning alone is not enough, because if you're all strategy without presence, you'll be tested. The Stoic equivalent to this is balance, courage and wisdom. The lion is your courage. The fox is your discernment. And both are needed if you want to live a life that is not controlled by others. Let's apply this to your daily life. You show up to work, you try to be nice, you try to avoid office politics, you give credit to others, you don't ask for more. You think this makes you morally superior, but in the eyes of the world, it makes you irrelevant. Meanwhile, someone else with half your integrity but twice your assertiveness rises. Not because they're better, but because they're visible, strategic, unafraid to play the game, and you sit in silence, confusing meekness with morality. But Marcus Aurelius never confused the two. He wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." And in context, being a good man meant taking action with discipline, ruling with clarity, making unpopular decisions when they served the greater good. His goodness was not passive, it was a sharp-edged sword, quiet but unshakable. You never saw him begging for approval. He did what needed to be done, and that's what made him just. So many men today are stuck in the illusion that if they're just nice enough, patient enough, selfless enough, the world will wake up and reward them. But the world doesn't reward nice, it rewards presence, precision, power, not violence, not manipulation, but clarity. And clarity starts with seeing the difference between intention and perception. You may intend to be fair, but if you're always giving, always available, always forgiving, people won't see fairness, they'll see softness, and the world punishes softness without boundaries. This is not cynicism, this is psychological gravity. You must stop expecting others to value what you haven't even learned to protect. Steve Jobs, for example, wasn't seen as traditionally kind, but he was revered. Why? Because he understood vision, he understood leverage, he understood timing. He didn't try to please, he tried to build. And in building, he became a force. Whether you agree with his methods or not, the result is undeniable. Power doesn't flow from likability, it flows from alignment, from being unafraid to be misunderstood while creating something meaningful. Now that doesn't mean becoming selfish, it means becoming strategic. The Stoics teach us to act in accordance with nature. which includes understanding the nature of people. People want clarity, they want strength, they want leadership. And if you don't give it to them, they'll take it from someone else. You don't need to be feared, but you must be respected, and that requires edge. So how do you develop that edge without becoming bitter? By remembering that virtue is not weakness. Real virtue requires boundaries. Saying no when it's easier to say yes. Walking away when it's easier to stay quiet. Holding your line when others want you to bend. This isn't arrogance, it's integrity with muscle. It's goodness that's immune to guilt. Machiavelli said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." But here's the Stoic answer. You don't need to be feared or loved. You need to be consistent, grounded, clear, because when you are, you no longer chase outcomes. You become the one others calibrate around. That's what it means to be untouchable. Not through domination, but through composure. Eventually, you'll realize that you don't have to become someone else. You just have to stop betraying yourself. The more you hide behind false virtue, the more power you give away. But when you marry Stoic clarity with Machiavellian sharpness, you become dangerous in the best way. Calm, controlled, and impossible to manipulate. Number 4, breaking the false choice. Kindness versus naivety. One of the greatest lies ever sold is this. You have to choose between being kind or being strong. That kindness means being agreeable, soft, always saying yes. That strength, on the other hand, means being cold, harsh, or ruthless. This is a false dichotomy, a trap designed to keep you weak while making you believe you're virtuous. The truth? Real kindness requires strength, and without it, kindness turns into naivety. The Stoics never encouraged submission. They taught clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Kindness is invincible if it be true kindness, not fawning or childish meekness." In that one sentence, he shatters the illusion. Real kindness isn't weakness. It's not bending over backward for people who take you for granted. It's not tolerating disrespect to maintain peace. That's not goodness. That's fear dressed up as virtue. You've probably experienced this firsthand. You do the right thing. You're patient, generous, forgiving. You let things slide to avoid conflict. And what happens? People don't reciprocate. They take more. They assume your silence means consent. And worse, you begin to resent yourself. You start to feel invisible, powerless. You wonder, why do I always lose when I try to be good? The answer is simple. Because what you called goodness was actually self-abandonment. Let's break this down. Naivety is the belief that people will treat you how you treat them, that fairness is automatic, that kindness will always come back. But life doesn't work that way. People treat you according to what you tolerate, and if your kindness has no boundaries, if it comes from fear of conflict or a desire to be liked, you're not being kind, you're just being used. Seneca, who mentored emperors and navigated the deadly politics of ancient Rome, wrote, "A good character, when established, is not easily overthrown." That's the difference. Naivety gets knocked over by the first storm. Kindness with character, it stands tall, even when tested. It doesn't collapse under guilt. It doesn't dissolve under pressure. It's firm, it's conscious. It says yes when it means yes, and no when it means no. Here's a real-world example. Fred Rogers, known as Mr. Rogers, he was the embodiment of kindness, gentle, soft-spoken, deeply empathetic. But don't mistake that for weakness. Behind the cardigan was a man of iron discipline. He fought fiercely, behind the scenes to protect children's programming from commercial exploitation. He stood up to Congress with quiet firmness and changed the course of public broadcasting in America. His kindness was not naive. It was principled, and that's why it had power. Contrast that with the person who says yes to everything, who avoids hard conversations, who apologizes for setting boundaries, who lets guilt make their choices. That's not a kind person. That's someone who has been trained to survive by pleasing, and survival mode kindness isn't sustainable. It leads to burnout, to resentment, to quiet misery. So what's the solution? You must stop seeing kindness as submission. Start seeing it as a tool, a conscious act rooted in self-respect. Kindness doesn't mean saying yes to everything. Sometimes the kindest thing you can say is no. No to abuse, no to manipulation, no to people who only show up when they need something. No to being emotionally available to those who are emotionally careless. The Stoics would call this justice, the ability to give people what they're due, no more, no less. That includes yourself. If you give everyone else patience, support, compassion, but deny it to yourself, you're not being virtuous, you're just disappearing. And yet this is the trap so many fall into. They think kindness is about being good in other people's eyes, but real kindness isn't performative. It doesn't need to be seen or praised. It's quiet, solid, it comes from the core, and it protects itself. You don't need to scream your boundaries. You just need to enforce them, not with rage, but with clarity. Let's go deeper. Why do people stay naive? Because it's comfortable. Believing that people will do the right thing spares you from hard truths. It spares you from confrontation. It lets you feel like you're above the fray. But eventually, that illusion costs you. It costs you your peace, your energy, your time. Naivety feels safe until it's not. Kindness, on the other hand, requires exposure. It means facing your discomfort. It means saying things people won't like. It means being misunderstood. And that's why it takes courage. Marcus Aurelius didn't call for us to be nice. He called for us to be upright, just, disciplined. That includes how we express kindness, not from fear, but from fullness. You'll know you've broken the cycle when your kindness is no longer a reaction, when you give because you choose to, not because you're afraid of what happens if you don't, when you can say no without explaining yourself, when you can hold your ground without guilt, when your presence says, I respect myself, even before you speak. In the end, the question isn't, should I be kind or strong? The real question is my kindness a gift or a strategy to be accepted? One empowers you, the other enslaves you. And Stoicism, real Stoicism, frees you from that trap. So stop performing kindness to avoid conflict. Let your kindness be calm, firm, and free. Because the strongest kindness is not the one that avoids storms. It's the one that stands through them, untouched. Number 5, the path to freedom. How to stop being nice without losing yourself. When people finally realize they've been living for approval, the pendulum often swings too far in the other direction. They go from being overly nice to cold, from giving too much to giving nothing. They mistake withdrawal for healing and cruelty for strength. But real freedom isn't about flipping the script. It's about leaving the script behind. It's about becoming whole. So how do you stop being the person who's always trying to please without becoming bitter or disconnected? The answer lies in one word: integration. You don't have to kill your kindness. You have to anchor it in clarity. And that clarity comes from doing 5 specific things. First, find your voice. And no, not the loud, aggressive voice that demands to be heard. I'm talking about your inner voice, the one you've ignored every time you said yes but meant no. The voice that trembles when boundaries are crossed but stays silent out of habit. That voice is your dignity trying to speak. You must learn to listen, and when you hear it, protect it, because that voice is the compass that keeps you from drifting into self-betrayal. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." This is not about pretending to be someone new. It's about remembering who you were before guilt and social conditioning muted your truth. Your voice is already there. You just have to stop drowning it with apologies. Second, practice saying no, not as an act of rebellion, but as a declaration of value. Every time you say no to what drains you, you say yes to your peace, and no, you don't owe anyone an explanation. A simple no thank you is a complete sentence. You are not responsible for how others feel about your limits. You are responsible for honoring them. That's not selfishness, that's self-respect. Look at Oprah Winfrey. She built an empire on generosity, but she also had to learn the power of no. She once said that her life didn't start to transform until she stopped saying yes out of fear, out of the need to be liked. She realized that saying yes to everything was not kindness. It was people-pleasing, rooted in insecurity. Her strength came when she began protecting her time, her focus, her peace, and from that space she gave even more, but from choice, not compulsion. Third, observe who gets uncomfortable when you stop overgiving. This is the litmus test. The people who relied on your silence, your softness, your compliance, they will feel shaken. They'll say you've changed, that you're cold now, that you're not the person they thought you were, but don't let that confuse you. What they're really saying is, I can no longer control you the way I used to. And that is a sign of growth, not guilt. The Stoics were clear about this, Marcus Aurelius wrote. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Living with integrity means some people will walk away, but it also means the ones who stay will see the real you and love you for who you are, not who you pretend to be. Fourth, stop trying to be understood by everyone. The moment you stop performing for approval, you will be misunderstood. You'll be called cold, rude, selfish. But that's only because people are used to the version of you that never said no, that never disagreed, that never walked away. Understand this. You do not need to be understood to be valid. Your life is not a courtroom. You do not need a jury. You need conviction. Seneca taught, "What progress have I made? I have begun to be a friend to myself." That's the turning point. When you stop needing the world to confirm your worth and begin building a life that aligns with your own values, when you can sit with your choices in silence and feel peace, not because everyone agrees, but because you finally do. And finally, choose authenticity over acceptance. This is where your power becomes untouchable. When you stop trading pieces of your soul for comfort, when you stop editing yourself to avoid discomfort, when you realize that rejection doesn't destroy you, it reveals who never belonged in the first place. Authenticity isn't a performance, it's a presence. It's waking up every day and choosing to live in alignment, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's lonely, even when it costs you people, opportunities, approval, because what you gain is far greater. Peace that doesn't shift with others' opinions, confidence that doesn't beg, power that isn't loud, but unshakable. This is what the Stoics aim for. Not popularity, but integrity. Not comfort, but clarity. Not acceptance, but alignment. They didn't live to be admired. They lived to be whole. And wholeness, unlike reputation, cannot be taken from you because it lives inside. So no, you don't have to become mean or hard or indifferent. You don't have to burn down your kindness. You just have to stop giving it away to those who don't know how to hold it. Let your kindness be a choice, not a reflex. Let your presence speak louder than your apologies, and let your boundaries be the proof that you finally come home to yourself. Because the real path to freedom is not becoming someone else. It's becoming fully yourself unapologetically. You've spent enough of your life trying to be good in ways that cost you your peace. But goodness without strength is not virtue. It's self-erasure. The Stoics didn't teach us to be liked. They taught us to be aligned, to speak clearly, to act with purpose, to live without apology. Now you have a choice. Keep shrinking to fit the version of you the world prefers, or expand into the one you were meant to become, not cold, not cruel, just real, clear, unshakable. If this message spoke to something deep in you, don't let it fade. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's ready to reclaim their truth. Because the world doesn't change when you're liked. It changes when you're whole.